From the moment I was born, just having lots of complications at birth, I ended up with an ostomy bag and spent the first month of my life in the hospital. When I was 7 months, I stopped breathing. When I was 3, I had another bowel obstruction and a fever of 106. And the doctors told my mom that if they didn't operate on me right away, that I wasn't gonna live. So by the time I was 3 years old, in the first 3 years of my life, I had already had 4 major surgeries and just lots of health complications. I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic illness that affects your major vital organs, your lungs, your pancreas, and your digestive system. And it causes a thick mucus buildup and really prevents the ability for you to breathe. I've always been able to kind of mask that there was anything wrong with me. As a kid, I've spent just as much time in the hospital as I've spent outside the hospital. When reality set in was when I was 14. Sort of a whirlwind of things were happening. I guess I certainly had a very rebellious stage in my life. Having a double lung transplant was explained to me very graphically. The doctor presented a very hopeless picture, and that put so much fear in me. And it put the thought of, why would I go through this pain and suffering if it wasn't even worth it? And I got into a lot of trouble. I was getting detentions every day. I was almost expelled from school. My grades were terrible. At 14, my outlook on life was, I don't care. In 2005, Zach invited me to a summer camp. I always kind of had this feeling that I can't go to camp because I have all these breathing treatments, I have all these medications, I have all this stuff I have to do. I built up the courage, and I went to camp, and I just had such a good time. I came off that mountain feeling refreshed, and that I just made a new family. Kind of put a little bit of confidence in me. My youth pastor, he prayed with me next to this tree, and it was just, I felt this weight lifted off my chest. I felt that God was telling me he had a plan and he had a purpose for me. And in August of 2009, right after my 21st birthday, I got really sick. I was on heavy antibiotics and on a lot of oxygen and really struggling to breathe. But I remember being in the hospital at that time and telling myself, I'm not gonna die. And I sat up and I started taking deep breaths in and out and just really fighting to survive. And I just felt this strength come over me, and I recovered from that. But again, I kept going back in the hospital over and over again. On November 25th in 2009, my dad committed suicide. It was super devastating to me and all my brothers. I found out when I was in the hospital in San Diego. It just seemed like one thing after another. I was back in the hospital in San Diego at UCSD, and the doctor came in and he told me I had 18% lung capacity left and about 2 years to live. That was my rock bottom. In 2010, on August 31st, I had a double lung transplant. I say that I got saved when I was almost 18, but I dedicated my life to the Lord when I was 22 after I woke up from that surgery. So after my transplant, I was able to run, play sports, do things I've never been able to do before. I suddenly had this full potential of living a completely normal life. So in 2013, I decided to go to Calvary Chapel Bible College in Marietta. I loved it. I was loving school. I was loving college. Something I just never imagined myself being in. And about 4 weeks into the semester, I had a little stomach ache. So I asked my brother if he could take me to UCSD. Just drop me off. I'm gonna be there for a day or 2 days maybe at the most. It was a Friday night. I was waiting in the lobby of the ER, waiting for my name to be called, and that was the last thing I remember. I had about a 10% chance of living. I woke up a month later out of a coma, and one day, just by the grace of God, I opened my eyes, and I had no idea what had happened. I didn't know where I was or what had happened or anything. And this recovery took, it was about 5 months that I was in the hospital recovering, and I ended up with an ostomy bag. In the next year and 7 months, I had major complications from my ostomy. I was admitted in the hospital over 30 times in the next year, but I prayed every day that God would just heal my body. My kidneys are failing, my liver's failing. Doctors are telling me I'm gonna need a kidney transplant. I'm gonna end up on dialysis the rest of my life. I feel like I'm slowly dying. And I told her, I want this surgery, and I don't care if I die on the operating table. I'd rather have a chance of this being taken away than living like this, because I'm not living. The doctor, she looked at me and she said, well, I don't see why that's not possible. And I knew that God had just answered my prayer. I had my ostomy reversed. I had it completely removed. I recovered from that surgery. I started Bible college again and graduated from Calvary Chapel Bible College. I now work at my church doing media. I'm involved with the college ministry. I help play worship for children's ministry, and I have had many opportunities to share what God has done in my life. There's a reason why I was born with this illness, and there's a reason why I've been through the things I've been through and faced life and death 5 different times throughout my life, and different surgeries and different procedures, and many times in the hospital, because when we go through those things, it only makes us stronger. And I believe that when God puts us on our back, we look up. Breathing by faith means that in Genesis 2:7, God breathed life into man. And in John 20:22, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he said, receive the Holy Spirit. And he wants you to not only breathe and have his Spirit, by faith, alongside faith. He wants you to have a relationship with him. And Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not yet seen. I want people to know that no matter what you go through, no matter how hopeless a situation is, that God is able to bring you through it. I want to tell people that you do what's possible, and let God do the impossible.